Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. It is episode 2566 of The Tom Woods Show. I don't have my usual books in back because I'm at a hotel in New Orleans, so I have these 70s drapes for your aesthetic pleasure. But I have with me Clint Russell, who is not sitting at the side of the road, but he is dealing with a power outage at his place. But
unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, of all possible times, like we had him on and then he disappeared. And then I have got to do this episode. I just have to. I have to do this episode because of Trump actually winning. And the victor was known the day of the thing.
Yep.
And it's amazing to me. So Clint, of course, is a host of Liberty Lockdown, a great show I highly recommend. And the thing is, look, we were both up really late because we were watching these results come in. And I have another guy I wanted to come on, and I think he's still sleeping. And if it hadn't been for the fact that this is a decent hotel, but the hot water wasn't working. So the shower was freezing. So I'm awake because of that. But otherwise, this would be very difficult.
This is brutal. It's brutal, Tom. But thank you so much for having me. Cliff Maloney should be joining us shortly. We think. My as soon as we are ready to start, my power goes out, my internet goes out. Now I'm relegated to my phone. I'm sleep deprived, but the country has been saved, Tom. No, I'm kidding. I do think that it is a bit of a reprieve. From my vantage point, what mattered most about last night was not so much Donald Trump, but rather the same thing that you and I, lamented so loudly 2 years ago when there was some governors that had an opportunity to get voted out after the lockdown era, that this was an opportunity to repudiate the current regime. Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, basically everybody that was a vicious lockdown governor didn't get thrown out of power. I thought that this was like the national opportunity for us to repudiate the tyrants that we had been dealing with. So for that reason, despite all of my concerns about Donald Trump and even his participation in the 2020 insanity, I still thought that it was vitally important that the people that were responsible for vaccine mandates and putting us on the precipice of World War III and censorship and, the list goes on and on. If they didn't get a severe L, particularly after they ousted Joe Biden from the nomination, unceremoniously, they slapped this lady in who's basically an empty vessel for the cabal. I mean, if they could have put her in there, given that she was so unpopular, and then she just walks into the Oval Office, like it would have been such a devastating sign for this country and for the people of this country. So that to me was the silver lining in all this. Despite all of my concerns about Donald Trump, it was just so important that the current regime loses.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I said in my episode with Dave Smith, and I have very good reason to believe this, and it doesn't mean that I have to have wild expectations or be unrealistic about the bad that could come. I get all that, but this was, I hate using the word existential, so I won't. But what's happened with the Democrats is so wild that I don't know how Bill Clinton carries on. I mean, he would be considered to be wildly right-wing at this point by these people. Bill Clinton would be wildly right-wing.
I made this point a couple of days ago. Right? Donald Trump is a Democrat from the early 90s. Like that, his policies are Democrat policies from the early 90s. Like he's just so not a radical. And I think that is a really huge indicator of how far left the modern Democrat Party has gone. And it puts me in a weird camp that I was rooting for a early 90s Democrat to win, but I was. So
yeah, I believe me, I hear you. Let me welcome Cliff Maloney to the program. Cliff, can you hear us?
I got you loud and clear, Tom. Sorry about
All right,
the
let's
delay.
talk to Cliff Maloney from Pennsylvania Chase, PA Chase. Tell us about your efforts in Pennsylvania, because they seem to have borne fruit. I saw you a few weeks ago, and you seemed cautiously optimistic. But as I was saying to Clint off the air, well, of course you would say that. You're working on this project. So, but you must have been, when the results started coming in, they were pro-Kamala at first, and you must have been blankety blanking bricks, I would say, at that point. But first of all, before we even get into that, what exactly did you do in the weeks and months leading up to the election?
Yeah, let me give just a quick 1 minute kind of breakdown of how we got to launch the PHAs. I've been on the show before, Tom. Worked for Ron Paul, worked for Rand Paul, ran YAL for 4 years. And ever since 2020, I've been running this group, Citizens Alliance, and one of our major states is Pennsylvania. And so what happened was the Republican Party was so inept, so corrupt, so inefficient, that what was happening was we'd have Ron Paul Republicans winning primaries and then barely winning general elections in districts that they should win by 10 or 15 points because, you look at Oz and Fetterman. When you end up with a Fetterman, you have to ask yourself, what's going on here, right? So anyway, after 2022, all these rules had changed in Pennsylvania. And so they now allow for 50 days of voting, right? Ballots go out like mid-September, and there's all this time to vote. So long story short, we launched this program, the Pennsylvania Chase. We said, we're going to do what the Democrats do. We're going to chase ballots because in Pennsylvania, you can't harvest, you can't touch the ballot. And so we hired 120 full-timers. We knocked doors from September 1 through Election Day, and we knocked about 500,000 doors. And our goal was Pennsylvania Republicans statewide averaged 20% of the mail-in vote compared to the Democrats. So you're going into Election Day down 20 to 8, right? You're down 60 points. And so our model said if we can get to 33%, we think Trump wins the state. Well, now I can brag a little bit. We landed at 34.5%. And so we obviously won. It was a huge night. But it's just doing what the Democrats do, right? This isn't some new tactic. It's just the right has never done something like this.
Well, I'm looking forward to your invitation to the White House and receiving the Medal of Freedom at some point, Cliff. But holy moly. So where did you watch the results?
So I'm here at our headquarters in Pennsylvania. So we had 10 Airbnbs where we housed all of our ballot chasers around the state, right? We had different target areas. And then right in Harrisburg, near the Capitol in Lemoyne, PA, we have just a small office here. I joked, people said, man, that looks like a crap hole. And I said, yeah. I said, we like to be respectful with our resources. But I debated going down to Mar-a-Lago. We did get an invite, but I said, look, I'd rather be here with our people. And I mean, it was crazy. We were up pretty much through the night. Obviously, when they called it, it was great. I had to turn CNN on to watch their reaction. But it was, we did not expect them to call it last night. If you would have asked me a month ago, I would have said there's no way. So the fact that we had such a significant lead, I mean, this McCormick and Casey U.S. Senate race that's down ballot, I bet you that goes on for a while because it's only a 50,000 vote margin. And in PA, there's so many different rules with the provisionals and the courts. But I think this being decided, I just think this is much better for people having faith in elections either way. So I'm pretty pumped.
Cliff, I gotta hop in and ask you one question. When you actually arrive at someone's door, are there undecided voters? Like, are there people that really don't know about Donald Trump? What are you telling them to try and convince them to vote that way?
Yeah, so it's actually been very fascinating because we typically, and this is literally for the last 8 to 10 years, I typically get involved in races. If I'm doing a big race, it's usually a primary between a Ron Paul Republican and some sort of rhino sellout. It's just, somebody very much not our brand. And those doors are tough because you're going to a door of a Republican and you're trying to explain, based on certain issue sets, why this Republican's good and this Republican's bad. And I can say this, none of us are elected officials at the moment. I'm rooting for you, Clint. I got a couple ideas for you. Tom, I've never been able to talk into it. But when you go to the door and you're talking to these people, most of them just say, "Oh, I'm a Republican." It's like, well, thanks, Bob, but this is a primary, right? Like that's just it's their visceral reaction. "Oh, don't worry, I'm Republican." All right, well, you need to make a decision. Those are tough doors. General election doors. I'm not talking about chasing. Typically in a general election, you're talking to swing voters, right? You're trying to get them moderate Democrat or moderate Republicans or blue dog Democrats. Those are tough. These were the easiest doors we've ever knocked. You're going to people's doors that have a ballot sitting on their table because they requested it. And you're just saying, "Hey, Bill, I know you're going to vote Republican up and down the ticket. Would love for you to commit to voting today." So Democrats call this a reminder campaign. They're annoying the voter, if you will, to get them to take action. But I'll just share that it's some of the most enjoyable door knocking because you're just saying, "Hey, we're all on the same team," which I kind of hate that part as a liberty guy. But it's very easy to kind of deliver results when you're not even really talking about messaging. You're just making sure that they vote.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing, that I assumed that had to be what it was, to light a fire under them. It's not like they need to understand what the policy differences are or anything like that. It's just a matter of, get off your rear end and get over there and be heard.
Well, we looked at the numbers from 2020 before I announced that I would do this. Because look, Charlie Kirk asked me to do this. A lot of people from Trump's team, they know that me and my number 2 guy, Justin, we knocked doors. And they pretty much said, "Look, we don't have the bandwidth to kind of own Pennsylvania." Turning Point was doing Arizona and Wisconsin. And I'm talking to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. And we're already in PA with our organization. We knocked tons of doors at Citizens Alliance in the primary. And so we agreed to do it. But the number that kind of shocked me, if you look at 2020, Biden won Pennsylvania by 80,000 votes. But there were 141,000 Republicans who requested a ballot and never voted. And I was like, well, okay, that's a problem that if you solve that problem, Trump would have been in the White House, right? But nobody talked to him because of the corrupt RNC back in 2020. And I hope, Tom, we don't mind me naming names here and calling people out, but you have these consultant class who just completely never wanted to give up a penny in terms of their TV ad buy, right? Look at Oz and Fetterman. This is what was mind-boggling to me. Fetterman spent about $8 to $10 million on chasing these ballots because of the new rules. Oz spent $0. And I was like, how is that possible? Because the consultant class didn't want to give up $10 million in TV ad spend where they're putting 15% in their pocket. Nobody's going to give up that $1.5 million. These people are scumbags. And so, we just said, all right, well, I guess we're going to have to do this to save a lot of our liberty camp.
Hey, everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you're getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you're a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. What if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking? Use your website as a lead generation engine. What if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO Expert Search Engine Optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. Well, let's I want to share with you a short passage from an article written by great friend of the show, Dan McCarthy, over at the Intercollegiate Studies Institute. He's a syndicated columnist. He writes, his columns appear regularly in the New York Post, but he does write for the New York Times once in a while. And this morning, as we record this, that is to say, he has an article in the Times, New York Times, called "This is Why Trump Won." And let me just read you a few paragraphs and maybe we can chew on this. Mr. Trump's victory amounts to a public vote of no confidence in the leaders and institutions that have shaped American life since the end of the Cold War 35 years ago. The names themselves are symbolic. In 2016, Mr. Trump ran against a Bush in the Republican primaries and a Clinton in the general election. This time, in a looser sense, he beat a coalition that included Liz Cheney and her father, former Vice President Dick Cheney. Those who see in Mr. Trump a profound rejection of Washington's present conventions are correct. He is like an atheist defying the teachings of a church. The challenge he presents lies not so much in what he does, but in the fact that he calls into question the beliefs on which authority rests. Mr. Trump has shown that the nation's political orthodoxies are bankrupt, and the leaders in all our institutions, private as well as public, who stake their claim to authority on their fealty to such orthodoxies, are now vulnerable. This may be exactly what voters want, and by allying herself with so many troubled and unpopular elites and institutions, Ms. Harris doomed herself. Do Americans think it's healthy that generals who have overseen prolonged and ultimately disastrous wars are treated with such respect by Mr. Trump's critics? A similar question could be asked about the officials in charge of the intelligence community. Now, the whole article is great. I'll link to it at tomwoods.com/2566 if you can stand to click on a New York Times link. But it really, really is worth reading. Clint, this is exactly what we've been saying, but Dan has a way of saying that's so much more palatable than the way you and I say it.
I just say it with a lot more slurs in there. But I agree with everything he said. I would just add to it that it's not just a repudiation of the establishment. It's also a repudiation of the establishment media in such a profound way. What we saw was, for the first time, a president of the United States was elected with basically every major media outlet just dragging him as a fascist and a dictator and a tyrant in waiting for 8 years straight.
Yeah.
And then on the inverse of that, you have him going on what ultimately amounts to the real mainstream media, which is podcasts. Hello. Theo Vaughn and Tom Woods. Sorry. I'll throw Tom in there. I don't think Trump did your show though. Joe Rogan and all these other podcasts. Basically the alternative media now has the keys to the kingdom. Like that is unbelievable and unbelievably profound, that the gatekeepers no longer exist, that they have been, just as Joe Biden demonstrated that the presidency, the king had no clothes. Well, the media has no clothes either. And I think people have not really come to grips with that. I think you had Vivek on as well, but for Vivek Ramaswamy to do part of the problem with Dave Smith and Liberty Lockdown with me, and to go out of his way, and RFK Jr. the same thing. Like I had a sense that they knew what I thought was true, but I didn't know it was true until last night. That you can win the presidency just doing podcasts. That is super powerful, and I hope people are realizing that.
Well, let me jump in on that. On what you said about the media, because this was so ridiculously over the top. Nazi and fascist, and the stories they were telling. They were trying to claim that Trump was suggesting, I can't even say it with a straight face, that Liz Cheney be executed by firing squad. Now, one of my most opened email newsletters of the past year was the one I wrote about that, because the subject line was Trump and the non-existent firing squad. We all understood. Everybody, I was watching that Trump event in which he said that. I was watching it live. And, I may not be the world's most observant person, but if somebody makes a death threat, I generally hear it. I didn't notice anything. I just kept watching. I didn't notice a thing. So the next day,
when you're going to put someone in front of a firing squad, you always hand them a gun first, right?
Exactly. I know. It's just what. So, but I woke up the next day and they're all talking. So I thought he must have said something else since I watched that thing. No, they were referring to that thing. So they all know. These people, they may be sinister and evil, but not all of them are stupid. Like that was not an act. That wasn't stupidity or they misunderstood. I mean, the Washington Post's headline about it said, "Embracing violent rhetoric, Trump, blah, 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 blah." His point was that she's violent. She's always calling for another war. That's violence. Wars are all about violence.
Exactly.
So he was saying that she was violent, and Washington. So there were times when you think to yourself, can any candidate withstand that kind of? I mean, it's not a distortion. That was a lie. That was just a flat out lie. And you can find so many. I mean, and the way they portray anything he says or does, like the no taxes on tips. Oh, Harris has a new idea, no taxes on tips. But when it's Trump, it's Trump's no taxes on tips will cost the federal government. You think maybe the people just aren't able to withstand that. Like maybe a lot of people do trust this.
Think about how insincere these scumbags are too. That as soon as it's a policy proposal or a tax proposal that is from their opposition, they immediately identify the deleterious consequences of taxation. They go, tariffs, that's a national sales tax on every single product. And it's like, well, then what's the income tax, you assholes? Sorry, I get upset about this. But let's just add to this real quick that Barack Obama, in his closing pitch to the nation to try and get Kamala Harris in there, again, quadruple down on the very fine people on both sides hoax. If you want to talk about a lie, like if you're an imbecile, you might be able to construe a death threat from that Trump thing about Liz Cheney. I mean, it's obviously not what he was saying, but I can understand by someone who's like has no familiarity with reality, they might go, oh, okay, maybe. In that speech, Donald Trump says explicitly, and I'm not talking about the white nationalists or the whatever, they should be condemned totally. He goes out of his way to clarify, and they have still used that for 8 years straight. So I am genuinely to the core of my being, I am gleeful that in 2024, you cannot run for the president of the United States touting a endorsement from Dick and Liz Cheney and walk into the White House. The neocons suffered as huge an L as the COVID regime and everybody else. I am just thrilled about that. And on the inverse of that, had they prevailed with a Liz and Dick Cheney endorsement, I would have been devastated.
Yes, it would have been hard. Let me just say one more thing, then I'll let Cliff jump in. Of course, now I didn't. I think you guys tuned in because Cliff, you were saying that you wanted to see what CNN had to say, and I generally don't have the stomach for it. I really don't. I can't bear to hear it. But apparently, a bunch of them, because I saw what they were writing on Twitter, a bunch of them were saying, "Well, I guess this shows a lot of the country is Nazi." And so, and it doesn't even dawn on them. Maybe we're wrong. Like maybe this is a reflection of we're just not understanding something going on in the country. They're never wrong. It's not that they're wrong or they need to rethink anything. It's that I guess the country is a lot more pro-Hitler than we thought. Like that is the extent of the reflection that they're going to engage in.
I think it's a taste of their own medicine. They're kind of buying their own BS. And what excites me, but also could have been devastating, is we're moving past soundbite campaigns being the norm. And I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about soundbite news, right? I mean, my dad, when he tells me he saw it on Instagram or TikTok, and he's in his 60s, it's like, to me, that's actually, a good thing. I know some people have an opinion on that, but like, he's not just turning on the news and getting the one line from Walter Cronkite from 30 years ago that is the accepted, okay, this is the power of the world and this is the narrative, right? There's all these alternatives, right? Whether it's podcasts, whether it's just different social media platforms where you can get different perspectives, and especially X with Elon taking over, I just think we're moving past the soundbite. Here in Pennsylvania, I hear the same thing from every single person. Oh, I've had my TV muted for 3 months because it's just wall to wall. Right now, if you're in Florida or, some of these states that aren't really swing states anymore, maybe it's not as bad. It was horrible here, right? But people tune it out. And all of it is the same. Donald Trump, he wants to have a war on women. Really? We've been hearing it for 12 years. Like, you can't come up with anything more creative. His project 2025, it's not even his project. Like anybody that takes 1 minute would learn that. And so I don't want to say I was going to quit politics if this didn't go the right way, but it would have been very difficult for me to have any hope in the American people if they would have bought the nonsense and the absolute lack of any vision, the lack of any type of dare I say, joy, while at the same time, whether you love Trump or don't, look at who he brought together. Tulsi, RFK, Elon, Ron Paul, RFK. I mean, this was a coalition against the uniparty. It's kind of what we've always talked about or hoped would come together. And so if basic blue collar people didn't see that, I would have said, what are we doing? If we were trying to run with one of those guys, like a Ron Paul or somebody that was super aligned, but now we've got all of these people that due to COVID pushback, due to pushing back on big pharma or the health industry, if we couldn't pull together, I call it the independent thinker caucus. If we can get all those people together to win, then what the hell are we fighting for? So that gives me some optimism.
Hey, everybody, this is not a sponsor message. I just wanted to remind you, first of all, that my Christmas party is coming up December 7th. It's about 35 minutes southeast of the Orlando airport, and it's a wonderful time. A chef prepares dinner for everybody in our own kitchen. I have several minor celebrities who are going to be coming, and it's just a wonderful night to get to know a lot of really great people. You can be yourself. You don't have to watch what you say, and everybody raves about it. So I hope you can attend. It's a benefit enjoyed by members of my Supporting Listeners program. Now, I have supported people on Patreon in the past, and I've been very happy to do so. But supportinglisteners.com beats the heck out of any Patreon you've ever contributed to. Because how many of those people are inviting you to a Christmas party? Or how many, instead of having you look at a godforsaken screen 24 hours a day for their content, are also mailing you in the physical mail a print newsletter like this one, 16 pages. This one's 20 pages. You get that in the physical mail, and it's not just the same things I send in my email newsletter. It's all fresh content, not seen anywhere else, just for you, nice and hot. So for a change, you can be old school. Remember, we were old school, right? We liked reading physical things. Well, ain't no podcaster or any Patreon sending you a physical newsletter, or for that matter, inviting you to a murder mystery dinner party for free. I have several of them lined up for around the country with many more to come. The one in New Orleans still has plenty of spots available, and you can pay to attend these murder mystery dinner parties, but you don't have to. Just be a supporting listener of the Tom Woods Show. You get that for free. Not to mention my censorship-free Tom Woods Show elite group. It is the best possible supporters program in the world, and you're part of a community that you just can't beat. So check it out at supportinglisteners.com, and before you know it, you will be holding in your hands one of these right here. Supportinglisteners.com, and thank you very much. Now, I hear you. Now, I'm going to check so that I'm 100% accurate. But there's another person who has a particular interest in all this, and that's Lynn Ulbricht.
Oh man.
Ross's mother. So I wrote to her yesterday and said, I hope it turns out right today. I'm sorry you have to have all this anxiety. And I don't think she'd mind if I shared her response. She said, thanks so much for your friendship and support. I'm trusting God in this and trying not to stress too much. And then this morning I wrote to her to say, I think you and Ross are going to embrace outside of prison very, very soon. Because I actually do think Trump's going to deliver on that. Because I don't think he views this as, this is not really requiring a lot of political capital from him. It's not, and I do believe that he believes in the deal. He made this deal, and maybe he takes some heat for 2 days, and that's it. Like Ross Ulbricht's case is not still going to be discussed 8 months later. It's not a big deal. Not to mention, I think he does want to pardon the January 6th people, and if he can include some non-January 6th pardons in there to get the opposition all discombobulated, because now they have to also talk about Ross Ulbricht and everybody else. I think he would prefer that.
Let me just double down real quick on Ross and Trump. And I'm not going to tell you the person's name, but just know this, that in the past month, Trump was speaking to somebody and they mentioned the word libertarian. And they said, this is what he said. He said, libertarians, those guys, all they care about is getting that king out of prison. And I know that might sound harsh, and I hope if Lynn is listening, that's a compliment, right? But Trump is the type of guy where, there are certain things he remembers, right? And, I joke with Anthony Sabatini in Florida, but like anytime Sabatini's name comes up in front of Trump, and Tom, I was telling you this, all Trump ever says is, that guy tried to name the longest highway in Florida after me, right? He remembers weird things because Ross was a huge negotiation for the libertarians to welcome him, right? And a lot of you guys, you guys were part of some of this, but I wanted to share that story, and I will go to war, figuratively, against the entire administration if the Ross thing does not come through. And I want to make that pledge to Lynn and to the libertarian community. That is a major reason why I'm excited about a Trump victory.
That's why it was so important that we got the promise to be a day one promise, because we don't have to wait and see. If he doesn't deliver on day one, we marshal our forces and we go to battle. So I think he's going to get it done. I'll tell you, there's 2 times I've cried on air. One was talking about fatherhood on Liberty Lockdown, and the other was interviewing Lynn Ulbricht for the first time. The pain that woman has been put through, the unyielding drive to free her child from unjust imprisonment is so profound, so powerful. I've become really good friends with her over the past couple of years. She's just a lovely human being. It brings me incredible joy, and I'm trying to get through this without crying. It brings me incredible joy, and it's probably the greatest victory that the Libertarian Party has had. On top of that, and I got to throw Angela McCardle's name in here. Obviously, she's responsible for so much of the negotiations on the back end of this thing.
Yeah.
But to get a libertarian, get Ross freed, get a libertarian in the cabinet, a bunch of other, libertarian leaning things. Apparently there's a chance that we'll have some libertarians that are put on the board to review the J6 political prisoner cases. I think that this is all great stuff, and a rare moment of genuine hope that I got to receive from the political process. I don't think I've ever had that in my lifetime, Tom. So it felt good.
Well, I've gotten to know her, as a lot of us have over the years. Back in 2021, I had my 2000th episode. I did a big live event in Orlando, and I had thousands of people in attendance there. And I said, I want you to speak to them. Here's an audience. So let's get up there and talk. And every time she gets up there and talks, even though she has every right to be angry, even hysterical, she is so collected and calm, just laying out the facts. But she's so calm that it can mask what she's actually enduring, which is, imagine your son is unjustly imprisoned for going on 10 years now. How can you find joy in anything? Knowing that he's languishing behind bars. How do you find joy? And so that this might come to pass is an astonishing thing. So
let me tell you guys just one other thing about Lynn. I honestly have this self-reflection moment anytime I see her. She's at every event, right? I saw her at CPAC last year, all these libertarian events. I almost have a sense of guilt whenever I'm interacting with her, because I think to myself, if I had a son and I went through what she did, would I be that dedicated?
Yeah.
Right? This is a decade of her working event after event, working every angle she can. And obviously, fingers crossed, Ross is not out yet, but kudos to her. It worked, right? At this point, it's on a trajectory to work, and her son's going to be a free man, because he's got a rock star mom that was relentless. So it's pretty amazing.
It's a private moment that I have no right to, but I have to say, I wish I could at least be a fly on the wall for that moment when they're reunited, in normal society. I really wish I could say, and by the way, I want to amplify what Clint said, which is that Angela McCardle, if he gets out, it's because of Angela McCardle. And the people who have criticized her have not in their lives done anything that even comes anywhere near releasing an innocent man from prison. Okay, never come anywhere near. So that's one thing. I would also say a runner-up award goes to Michael Malice, because he had Vivek on his show, and Vivek was doing the usual routine about Snowden and Assange, And that's all great. I support that. But Mal said, what about Ross Ulbricht? And I don't think Vivek was familiar with the case. So then he looked into it, and then he became a champion of it specifically because of that. And he also brought it to Trump's attention. So isn't it unbelievable that I think the two people who by far did the most to make this happen are people like we know personally in our world. So it's interesting that our world in this new world actually can have a bit of an impact on things.
Exactly, man. I mean, the podcast world may have just freed a human being.
Yeah.
How is that even possible? But I think the podcast world may have just elected a president of the United States. So yeah, times they are a-changing. This is a really profound paradigm shift. And I think that was the main takeaway I had while watching the salt factory over on MSNBC last night after Trump won, is that they have to reassess everything. Like, they don't understand the electorate. They don't understand the media landscape. They don't understand what makes us tick, why we're so pissed. Like, they still circle back, as you were saying earlier, to us being basically fascist, or just maybe we're just more racist and misogynist than they had estimated. Like, that's still kind of what they're dealing with. But I think that at the end of the day, they will probably, assuming they have anybody that's not completely psychotic, they will reflect on, hey, our messaging actually doesn't work because it's not in alignment with the values of America. Like, that is what I want them to feel in their core, because I would like to have a Democratic Party that doesn't support war and censorship and basically everything else that the neocons did 25 years ago. But as of last night, it doesn't seem as if they've got that message, and I'm not really hopeful that they will. And in some ways, I don't care if they do, because at this point, my hopes are in the GOP. I got a ton of pushback, as I'm sure many of our of our brethren did when it came to supporting Trump. But I really felt, as Cliff was clarifying earlier, like, if we couldn't win with this kind of hodgepodge of dissidents, like, we'll never win. Like, we could never ever win. And even with RFK Jr., who was polling at 10% nationally, and Vivek Ramaswamy and Tulsi Gabbard and so many and Ron Paul and Elon Musk and Joe Rogan and all these enormous dissident thinkers and figures, if that wasn't enough to prevail, well, then we'll never win, ever, ever, ever. And I just hope that, like, the hardline Libertarian Party voters reflect on that a little bit.
But doesn't it excite you guys to have a Donald Trump that has been through all this? Like, in a weird way, obviously I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, but to be indicted, to be charged, to be found whatever, to be shot at, to be impeached, to have all these people that are obviously neocons that stab them in the back. Now Pompeo should scare all of us, but that's for another day. But the fact that Vivek is pitching him on cutting 30, 40, 50% of the federal bureaucracy, I mean, these are ideas Ron talked about years ago, and we were all called kooks, right? Now you have a guy coming in, Trump. I think he has a chip on his shoulder, and he's got 4 years, right? There's no re-election. And I'm not saying I'm excited like it's going to happen, but this is probably the first time I've actually had hope at, like, actually reforming government. If you put Elon Musk legitimately in charge of this government efficiency, like, if you would have told me that 3 years ago, I would have said, you're nuts. Elon Musk is some lefty. What are you talking about? And this whole transformation has happened. But, like, has there ever been a time in your lifetimes where it's like, hey, this person's about to take office, and I actually think they're going to cut government because they'll have the power to do it, like somebody in that position? I've never felt that way. Maybe Malay in Argentina, we were all like, wow, maybe there's something here. But I've never felt that way about any system in the U.S. at any level.
Well, I'll say this. I am not putting my confidence in the government getting cut. I mean, if it does, that's a bonus. That isn't the reason that I said we got to support him. It's more, maybe we can try and put a stop to having every institution in the country, but mainly the government institutions, being weaponized against normal people. I mean, that's priority number one. There are things, and maybe we can have, I hate to say national conversation, but with voices that haven't been heard before. So yeah, Trump will not make the right decision in a lot of cases, but I will not have buyer's remorse, because at least there's a prospect that sane positions will be listened to, and it will be out in the public, talked about. If there's an RFK or a Tulsi or whatever, and Tulsi's not always great on foreign policy, but she's better than what we have, then at least we get to talk outside this narrow range of, well, should our strategy in Ukraine be this or this?
Right.
No. I want to talk about the whole thing. I want to talk about whether we should be doing it at all. I want to talk about how it got started, what the real story of the thing is, not the comic book version that I get on MSNBC. That's what makes me happy, and that's what fills me with hope, is that the dissidents may actually have some prospect of being heard. And, you said, Clint, that you got some pushback. I've already muted all the people who might have given me pushback, so I got none. I muted all those people because I just don't care. I don't care.
Smart man.
Don't care about their opinions. And by the way, I do have some friends who are rather dear to me who abstained, and I think they were wrong, but I understand their reasoning. That's one thing. They didn't attack me. It was fair enough. It's an honorable disagreement. But what I actually had was, after I did the episode with Dave, my email inbox started filling up with people saying, "You changed my mind. I'm going to go do it." And again, not because we necessarily think that we're going to get what we want or everything we want, but that I think it is important in this day and age where we are learning the friend and enemy distinction, that somebody who doesn't absolutely hate my guts is running things. That matters. That actually matters, because the contempt that the media and political classes have for you is so palpable. I mean, the more miserable you are, the happier they are. And the fact that, I think the three of us, and I think a lot of, the people we hang around with, we generally are fair-minded people in general. I disagree with people, but I don't make things up about what they believe, because I'm very good at refuting what they believe. So I know what they think, I state it, and I answer it. But when I look at the way the other side I have to just be blunt. These are terrible people who make no attempt to be even-handed, no attempt to even understand the other side of a conversation, none whatsoever. All they want to do is smash, humiliate, distort, lie over and over and over and over again, every possible opportunity. So yeah, those people need to be defeated and humiliated, regardless of what Trump ends up doing. Those people, because they're not like you and me. As I say, you and I genuinely want to be fair. And then we look at the other side who have absolutely zero interest in that. And it's like, I can't even, and it's funny that a lot of the things they accuse us of are projection, because they say, oh, well,
right,
you want to be a dictator, or you want to do this and that. The reason they're saying it is that it's obvious from the way they think and talk and act that is what they would do if they were in our situation. So therefore they expect that, of course, that's how we would act. It's crazy. And yes, so they deserve this.
Every accusation is a confession. As they call us fascists, they simultaneously are using the largest corporations in human history to dictate what I'm allowed to say on the internet and what pharmaceutical products I have to put in my body. And if I refuse, they want me to be excommunicated from civilization, unemployable, and they want my kids taken away from me. That's what we were dealing with just 3 years ago. It's so important that those people suffer an L. And I refuse to accept any criticism for my desire to see them suffer as a consequence. They wanted me ruined. They wanted me to never have a job again. They wanted me to never be able to go into restaurants or a movie theater or basically have a normal life again. Like, those people had to lose. And look, I understand that Donald Trump is Mr. Operation Warp Speed. I understand that he did the 15 days to slow the spread. I understand. I can make the argument against Donald Trump better than all of my detractors can. So just save your breath. I know every bad thing about the man, and I agree with you. It doesn't change the dynamic that we were facing. That this is the CIA, FBI, military industrial complex candidate. Like, that's who Kamala Harris was. It couldn't be more obvious. If you're still sitting there saying they're the same thing, you're an idiot. They're not the same thing. Okay. I've spent a lot of time. I've probably spent 6 or 7 or 8 hours with Vivek Ramaswamy at this point. I promise you, Vivek Ramaswamy and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are not the same thing as Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and Dick and Liz Cheney. And if you think they're the same thing, you need to get off your couch and go touch grass for a little bit. It's absurd.
And it should scare the heck out of us that, once again, I mean, they didn't get crushed. This was not a landslide, right? I mean, we did pull it off, and we did win quite a few of these swing states. And I was obviously happy that Pennsylvania delivered it in terms of 270. It was very exciting for our whole team. But this was still a close election, right? People would ask me a week out, where are we? You know, Tom, you were joking that I was very confident. I'm like, well, the numbers are good, right? But this is what I'm working on, right? So I'd like to believe it's going to turn out well. But I will always end, or at least somewhere along the way, say Kamala Harris could have been president. Yeah. And that is something that, once again, we fell on the right side of this. But Clint, it killed me how many people, the assessment you just made, and Tom, what you said, the disdain, the contempt that these people have for us, it just still baffles me that there are so many people. So there's work to be done. I think there's a lot of more people that have, woken up because of COVID. I do think that was one of the monumental shifts. And I think this whole coalition around Trump was kind of the next layer of that, where people said, yeah, listen, this uniparty corrupt establishment is obviously now the Democrats. And by the way, what is their base? Like what is their national coalition they're going to put together for 28? I can't figure this out. I know it's 4 years from now, and we're talking the day after the election, but like they lost in pretty much every demographic except childless cat lady. Seriously, every demographic.
They've got the pilled out wine mom demographic lockdown, but I think they're going to have to broaden their electorate a little bit. I don't think that's going to get them across the finish line anymore.
No, it's a legit question, Clint. The corner they painted themselves into, but you're right. You make a good point. It wasn't a blowout, but the thing is, I consider it to be a blowout for this reason. Can you imagine a society in which the media was as unfairly and absurdly biased toward Trump as they were toward Harris, so that every single thing she says, they scrutinized, made stuff up about, accused her of being Hitler and all that? If it would have been a wipeout like Reagan versus Carter, I beg your pardon, Reagan versus Mondale was the real wipeout in 1984. It would have been an absolute wipeout like that. So the fact that he wins at all in a country where a lot of people were afraid to say they supported him, no celebrity is afraid to say I support Kamala Harris. People were afraid to say they supported him, and yet he won anyway. By my definition, any victory that he wins at all under conditions like this is a blowout.
I just want to add too that a lot of people, accused me of doing this to scare quotes grift, that this was going to be lucrative. First off, if you've listened to me for any amount of time, I think you should have a good sense of my character. That is not the driving force behind why I did this. I was a very successful entrepreneur that became a podcaster and took one of the most catastrophic hits to my income you can possibly imagine. So I promise you, I am not in the libertarian podcasting space to profit. You idiots.
I know.
So let me start by saying that. But oh God, I had a point and then I got off on my tangent. Now I can't remember. Oh yeah. Look, I lost audience over this. I looked at my numbers and I'm probably down 10% in terms of audio and viewers. And that doesn't matter to me. Like, I think that I took the only, like, you can say that it was unprincipled. I think this was the principled stance that there are certain times where the two terrible options presented before you, one is just catastrophic and you have to choose. Okay. So I made the choice. I understand the libertarian instinct to want to keep your hands clean. And I'm sure that Trump is going to do a bunch of stuff that I adamantly disagree with, and all of those people are going to get to say, see, you shouldn't have supported him. And they're going to get to feel pure, and they're going to get to look at their hands and say, look how clean my hands are, Clint. Your hands are dirty. But that's childish. It really is. Like, on the inverse of that, I can't prove the alternative reality that would have happened under Kamala Harris presidency.
Exactly.
But I can pretty much assure you it would have been worse.
Right. So it's Clint. It's like what is seen and what is not seen.
Right.
Yeah, you can criticize and rightly so what is seen in the sense of something Trump does that's no good, but we're forgetting what is not seen. That unfortunately in this world, it's not that we have a choice between. See, this is the thing. It's like people who think, well, we'll just do regime change and we'll get a better leader in charge. But as in many cases with World War I and many other interventions, you weren't faced with a choice between good and bad. You were very often faced with a choice between tolerable and impossibly bad, or bad and very bad. And so in this case, that may well be in the sense that Trump will do things that will be really, really wrong. But I wish I lived on a planet where I could have pulled the lever for absolutely perfect. I wish I could have pulled that lever. That lever wasn't there. And it wasn't plausibly there. It just wasn't.
Well, and
yes, I'm going to choose the lesser of two evils because there's nothing wrong with doing that.
And see, the thing is, his team actually has the answers to basically every libertarian preference we could ask for. Like, if you want to see the government just in three-letter agencies obliterated, Vivek Ramaswamy is your guy. If you want to see a more moderate foreign policy, Tulsi Gabbard's your gal. If you want to see big pharma held to account and Operation Warp Speed looked into and Anthony Fauci investigated and prosecuted, RFK Jr. is the answer there. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm certainly not saying that Donald Trump is perfect, but in terms of the entirety of the offering that was presented before us, it's just clearly the best option I've ever had in my lifetime. That's the truth. So if I still rejected that, then I'm just obviously not in this to ever attain power. That's the reality.
And one thing I'll say to you guys, what motivates me, and this is, I think, a lot of people in liberty circles, is foreign policy. Now, listen, I'm not here to say that, we had a perfect foreign policy under Trump, but when you look at the lesser of two evils argument on that, I don't think it's even close, right? Kamala Harris trying to negotiate, in the world right now, it's a pretty bad chaos. I don't want to say I would have guaranteed World War III, who knows, right? But just the incompetency of her, I think one of Trump's best instincts is diplomacy, right? I'm not saying that he has, come to terms with us based on philosophers and a deep reading and understanding of what war is and what blowback is and what these things are. He wants people to stop dying, right? I think that's the best line. When these reporters try to get him, he's like, I want to stop the dying. No more dying. It's like, all right, that's the right answer.
It's the caveman non-interventionist stance.
Right. Now yes, I don't know if you've said that before. I'm going to start using that, Clint. That's exactly the right definition. So I just think on a lot of these key issues, and then you toss in the fact that cherry on top that Ross Ulbricht will be a free man. How is this not the cycle that every libertarian, every independent, every critical thinker came together and said, yeah, I think this is the time that we step up and at least cast a ballot at a minimum. And that's just where I landed.
Let me add to that real quick, because yes, by the way, I knew that Project 2025 wasn't Trump's because it was 800 pages. And I promise you, Donald Trump has never read an 800-page document. There's absolutely no way that was his project. But I did want to say it's not just that Trump is better on foreign policy. It's that Kamala Harris had a direct hand in fostering the war between Russia and Ukraine. And I think a lot of people don't know this. Obviously, if you've read Scott Horton's book, or it's I don't think it's coming out yet, but it will be soon. Provoked. She was in just a few weeks prior to Putin's ultimate decision to invade Ukraine. Kamala Harris, the useful idiot that she was, went over and talked in front of the entire world. I think it was at the UN. I'm not sure if it was UN or if it was in Ukraine, but she goes up there and she says the door remains open for Ukraine into NATO. And that was the reddest of red lines, as we all knew, that could not happen. She played a direct role in getting that war started. So if you think she was going to bring that war to an end, if you think she was going to prevent World War III, I'm not saying that she would have assured World War III, but I promise you she wouldn't have made it better. Donald Trump, on the opposite end of that, he has talked openly about wanting to have good relations with these dictators. That's the main thing that the corporate media drags him for. I think that's a good thing. I want you to have a phone line to these people, especially when they're sitting on 6,000 advanced nuclear weapons. Like, you cannot just hang the phone up when you have a life-ending opponent on the other side of this thing. It has been one of the gravest injustices of my lifetime that the Biden administration and the Antony Blinken-led State Department has done what they've done in this regard. So I am thrilled to see those people out. Like, they have to get out. So that's another huge silver lining that I don't think people are giving enough credit to. Like, there's a real chance. Hundreds of thousands of innocent people have died in that war. And there's a real chance that ends in the next few months. So I am thrilled about it.
I am a little more cautious about this, just because the people around him these days, some of them are good, some of them aren't good. And in this sense, he's like George Washington, in that, like, when George Washington didn't know where he was supposed to stand on a national bank. So it depended on whoever was the last person to talk to him. Well, Hamilton was the last person to talk to him. So he took that opinion. And he figured, well, Hamilton's in charge of the Treasury. He would know these things. So he went with it. And so,
same thing with Rand Paul and Donald Trump. The only reason we didn't go to war with Iran is because he went golfing with Rand at the last second.
Yeah, it's crazy. So we just need, but I feel like our side of this is positioned better now than it was 8 years ago.
The leverage, Tom. Even just the leverage of libertarians. I mean, we have the ears. I guarantee you, 3 to 4 members of the cabinet, their talking points are going to be, well, we want to keep the libertarians happy. We want to keep the libertarians as fans of what we're doing. And people can say, yeah, but is that real leverage? I'm like, it's better than what we've had.
Yeah.
Right? It's better to be in somebody's ear than not. And I just think you're going to see that. And I'm with you guys. I mean, there are going to be things that the deep state is going to continue to drive forward. We're going to get pissed off about it. And like you say, Clint, people will say, see, Cliff, you did all this work to help Trump get in, and his goons did this and they did that. Pound sand. Right? We're trying to take the gains. This is a time to really stick it to the man and the establishment. And we did, and we won. And so it's like, Elon placed the right bet. Let that sink in. I think that was the best photo I saw last night of him in the White House with the sink. If you guys haven't seen that, you got to check that out.
Clint, what is your names are so similar, and I know you both well, but Cliff, what's the website of your organization?
Yeah, sure. It's phas.com. Folks can find me on X at Maloney, Maloney.
But now that Pennsylvania is one, do you not have a broader website for everything else you do?
It's funny you say that, because these are where decisions are going to have to be made. Our technical website is teamcap.org. That's teamcap.org. And that's what we've been doing before we launched this, which is focused on Pennsylvania's legislature and trying to create a Ron Paul Republican. So that's probably where I would direct people, teamcap.org.
Okay. And of course, Clint, Liberty Lockdown, great show. I can't endorse it highly enough. I appreciate you guys coming on. I mean, I think between the three of us, we've had the equivalent of what would be considered one person's healthy night's sleep. So, in fact,
I can confirm that.
In fact, Clint was saying, look, I'll do my very, very best to get up, and I'm going to be broadcasting till late. And I said, if it makes you feel any better, we're all going to look like hell. So don't worry about that.
Yeah,
anyway.
Combined, we've got about 3 hours. I just want to tell your audience real quick. I had basically a hosting issue that I think a lot of people over on Spotify are not getting updates for Liberty Lockdown because of the host that I use. So I just want to encourage those that are longtime listeners of Liberty Lockdown. If you haven't been getting the latest, I'm still putting out episodes. You just got to go and basically resubscribe or refresh your feed. But thank you so much for having me, Tom, at Liberty Lock Pod on X. And look, I'm going to continue to be viciously critical towards Donald Trump. So I want to make sure everybody realizes I am not the MAGA hat wearing Donald Trump is our savior guy. Like, I will never be that. I just thought that this was a preferable outcome, and I plan to hold him to account for his promises. He tends to really want to keep his promises, and I think that that's something that we can play off of, and I intend to.
Excellent.
Tom, can I end with a compliment to both of you? During COVID, when everything went to crap, and I was running YAL at the moment, I took a firm stance right away that we weren't going to shut down. We were going to continue forward. And I kind of, the first week, I kind of took a step out. I assumed every organization, every libertarian leader, everybody on the right would be there with me. And to be frank with you guys, you two were two of maybe 8 people that right from day one said, no, we're absolutely going to stand up to the regime on this. And I appreciate that, because while it was disappointing that there weren't more, the folks that really stood up from day one, it meant so much to me to be able to have some courage and know that my commitment was right. And we've all been vindicated 10 times over now. But just having both of you here, I wanted to make sure I said that. Appreciate your leadership on that, because there were very few people who stuck their neck out when I think it mattered the most.
Thank you, Cliff, very much. Well, my thanks to both of you gentlemen, Clint Russell, Liberty Lockdown, and Cliff Maloney, who will soon be receiving the Medal of Freedom from the hands of the 47th President of the United States. Thanks very much to you both, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com, and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.